Okay, it's going. Hangout's on the air. You see that?
All right. You see you're live. Are you live?
Yeah. Looks like it.
Um,
Yeah, there it is.
and you can
Okay.
hear yourself, right?
Yeah, it looks
Okay,
the
so
right
now-
way here.
So what I need to do though is, hey, we're there.
Yep. Looks good.
All right. So the only thing is we got to have that link. So on the Google Hangouts Live, that link to the YouTube page,
Yep.
down to the bottom right-hand corner, copy that and email that to me. Because it's a new link that I got to paste in.
Bottom right-hand corner.
Yeah, on the Google Hangout screen.
Bottom right-hand corner. I don't know what you mean.
You see it say links?
Yeah.
Like yeah. So
Okay.
click on that link and it should say YouTube page.
Okay.
Copy that and email it to me.
Okay. You got it.
Right on. Can you hear yourself talking online? Does it sound like you're
Yeah, I could. Yep.
Beautiful. All right. I'm gonna get if you.
Is this working? Can you guys hear me? Can you hear me now? Okay. Hi, I'm Angus Clark, and welcome to this live cast. It's our first time doing it, so we've had a couple technical difficulties, but hopefully you can hear me now, and we've got a few people here. Sounds good. Okay. Prepping for a gig. If you know who I am, my name's Angus Clark. I've played guitar for the Trans-Siberian Orchestra for the last 16 years. Prior to that, I played for a new age artist named Kitaro. So I've got 20 plus years of touring experience. And over the course of that time, there have been numerous other gigs, some smaller, some more meaningful to me. Each one required a lot of preparation. A lot of times there was an audition involved. There was prepping for the audition. Then once you get the gig, there's preparing for the actual gig. So what we're going to use an example of how to prepare for a gig in this particular seminar is a gig that I just got. I've been playing guitar for Joe Lynn Turner. If you're not familiar with who Joe is, he was the lead singer for Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow from I believe 79 to 83. And they had their biggest hits with Joe as their lead singer. He is an amazing singer. He's one of the great voices of rock. And he stepped in there with Rainbow, and, you know, live they did a lot of the Ronnie James Dio material. They did the Graham Bonnet material. He did a lot of Deep Purple. He was actually in Deep Purple for a stretch there. So to do this gig, it is an honor, number one. It's a lot of fun, and it's material that I'm very close to. I was a huge Blackmore fan growing up, specifically the Rainbow on Stage album. So I'm just going to talk about what I went through in preparation for this particular gig. And all these things apply to any gig you might be doing. I think that any of you guys that are just starting out, or for you guys that are have been doing this a while, you probably realize that the challenges you encounter with your very first gig remain the challenges that you face throughout your entire career. So just to show you what I'm working with, it's a you know, it's a lot of the material is Blackmore, some of it's Yngwie Malmsteen, so I decided to play a Strat. I did not play this Strat, actually. I play this Strat on the gig. Interesting thing about this gig is that the entire band is tuned to D standard, and I thought that might be daunting for this particular format, so I'm going to do a lot of the examples on a standard tuned guitar, but I am going to switch over to that one for a couple of the examples just so we can see what we're dealing with. Then where possible, some of these, in taking this gig, I found out as much as I could about it, and that's one key part of prepping. And so first and foremost, it was, you know, what's on the set list. So I got a hold of all those tunes and I put them in an iTunes playlist. I'm going to talk through some of that. Also, you know, what keys are we doing them in? Oh, well, we're doing them in the album keys position, but we're on D standard guitars. So be prepared to do that. So that throws a whole technical thing into the mix that I had to sort out, which I'll talk about. And then to what degree are we just playing the album versions, or are we doing some live version? Rainbow is a very jammy band live, so you'd have to watch a whole bunch of YouTube videos of live stuff in order to figure out what version we're doing. Luckily, Joe has a live album that he made with an amazing guitar player named Carl Cochran, and that's the basic format for most of the gig. So I'm assembling materials. I get the MD on the phone and I say, can you send me what the preferred versions are? And then because I'm a Blackmore nut, I also have the original versions, and I'm scoping out, you know, where do I have to play the solo from the record? Where do I play something just kind of like the solo from the record? And where am I just doing my own thing? And what liberties am I going to take? So let me just let you hear the guitar sound. And this is what I did for practicing. I programmed my basic sounds into an Amplifier 12, which is a great unit I've been using. And this is the clean sound, which is based on a plexi, and it's with a phase shifter and a delay. So I came up with this sound based on what I like to get from my Marshalls. I use, on the in-town gigs, I'm going to be using the 2205, which is a 50-watt JCM 800, Pride of 1985. And it gets pretty close to the sound that I wanted, but it's a master volume head, so I was able to get a volume, you know, reasonable volume for stage. And the pedal board I put together is totally based on the Blackmore thing. So I've got a delay, I've got a phase shifter, I use a small stone. I've got, you know, a boost and some drive and a compressor. I didn't go so far as to buy a reel-to-reel tape machine and use it as a compressor or preamp the way Blackmore did. So that's what I used when practicing for the clean stuff. Here's the distorted, and then kind of a lead sound. So I'm just covering that. That's the basic sonic terrain, what I want to get on this gig. Then I get a hold of the set list. And a lot of this later Rainbow material is kind of new to me, but some of it's amazing. And I go through the whole set list, and I make sure that I've got a lot of the basic riffs. So I'm going to pull up my iTunes playlist here. So the first tune on the set list is Death Alley Driver, and it sounds like this. It's a lot of whammy bar stuff at the top. Okay, so Death Alley Driver. So classic Blackmore bag of tricks. And I just start tackling each tune on the set list. And you really, when you do this, when you're preparing for the gig, you can't play any favorites. You got to go through the whole set list, top to bottom. You can't disregard anything. Oh, I don't like that tune as much. You just have to get through everything every time you run it. So in investigating Death Alley Driver, I've got, and then he's got the riff. Then it goes into a chord progression. And you're off and running. So it's easy enough to figure out the basic Blackmore riffs. What you have to worry about in like Death Alley Driver, for instance, is when he gets to the solo. So here's a composed part. So this then, the composed part with all the scale work goes on a list of like the hard stuff for the gig. So you've got learning the gig, so I'm playing along, I'm learning the chord progressions, I'm learning the parts. Hard part. So you put that on a list, and you got to, at some point, just sit with it, figure it out, look up some YouTubes of somebody else doing it, which always helps, and get the part nailed at a slower tempo. Let's see, that's it. And then you're off into Blackmore land. Now, the interesting thing about this solo is that after those very composed parts, it gets into some really crazy stuff. He's like making noise and things like that. So at that point, I don't feel under obligation to be nailing exactly what's going on in the solo, and I will go to the live tape and I'll see what Carl did on the live in Germany thing, because he had an amazing take on what to do with the material. And then I'll go look at the live videos of Steve Brown from Trickster, who was doing the gig just before me, and I'll check out what he did on it. And I'll see, okay, this is where the guys are taking liberties. So this is a really cool thing to do when you've got a gig that someone, you know, that one or maybe 3 or 4 amazing guitar players have already inhabited before you, is you check out how many liberties were taken and what it is the artist is keying on that keeps those guys employed, and find out under what circumstances they left. So you can find out whether or not what they were doing was maybe not so cool and you want to go a different way. So in doing all that research, I saw that, you know, that back end of the Death Alley Driver solos where whoever's on the chair is, and that's a totally Broadway thing to say, sorry, but whoever's on the gig is bringing their own thing at that point. So I probably looked at some stuff that was slightly, you know, along the lines, like I like to do some stuff that's like these kinds of licks, you know. And then do a Blackmore-ish thing. Clean it up, throw some sweeps in, something else, and then you're off and running. Now, this solo gets really tricky right at the end, and this becomes the part that you have to nail, otherwise the band will hate you. So so that right there. So then that goes on the list, and it's like, I have to nail that part. So, and I listen to all the guys do it live, and everybody does it slightly differently because Blackmore is, you know, a genius and kind of insane player. And so the choices he makes are not like what anybody else is going to make. So the closest I could get to it was. You put it on the list, you practice it on the metronome, you bring it up to tempo, then the next time you're playing through the material, you get closer and closer to nailing it. So there's a couple other examples of like bits that, you know, you have to nail, otherwise the band are going to hate you. And usually they're exposed parts. There's a couple of my favorite tunes in here. One is Jealous Lover. So, as I said, you can't play favorites. I could sit there and play along to Jealous Lover like 5 times while I'm running the set, but no, you got to keep moving. But it's one of those great licks, and you want to make sure you get it right. And there's a million little variations of it throughout the song, so you have to listen for that. But where it started to get challenging is when we got up to Spotlight Kid. So this has this long intro that you're doing just over the hi-hat, and it's like so challenging lick. So that goes on the list. Got to spend some time on it. Got to make sure I can play that whole intro in the clear. So that one gets special attention. The other thing that happens in this song that is totally awesome, but fairly challenging. Well, first of all, Blackmore's solo is like totally, again, weird. He's like, just kind of crazy. So take some liberties with that one. And then when it gets to the end of it, there it comes. So suffice to say that goes on the list too, right? And that wound up being like so again, you know, figure it out. Play it slowly, speed it up, then put the track back on. So just moving ahead, just to give you guys, there's a couple other really fun things in the set. One is Spanish Castle Magic. We mostly play the Jimi Hendrix version. That's awesome. I figure I'm going to do all kinds of crazy wah-wah stuff on that. I get to, you know, throw down. You got to find your moments where you're really going to throw down. And then we get up to the Yngwie tunes, because Joe made a record with Yngwie, which is totally awesome and terrifying. And the tune that's in the two tunes that are in the set list, one is Dreaming, and the other is Rising Force. And Rising Force is at like 240 BPM on the metronome. Now, there's like a million videos of guys playing this solo flawlessly on YouTube, and I'm not one of them. But I'm the guy on this gig. So this was the first thing that went on the list as the thing I'm going to learn. And I made a backing track for myself at, you know, half tempo. I made a MIDI backing track for myself so I could speed it up gradually. And when I teach people about how to prepare for doing things fast, I generally say, you know, just practice it slowly and then, you know, keep speeding that up. But you also have to just kind of take stabs at doing it at the performance tempo so that your mind starts to get accustomed with what that's going to feel like. So this, I'm not going to embarrass myself by trying to play it quite at that tempo all by myself here, but suffice it to say, you know, it's kind of like the Sultans of Swing solo. It's like but you can't pick it like a normal person. So what I decided to do there was I'm up picking the first note, and then I'm just plowing back through the strings for the back half of it. So it comes out like this. So sorry, messed it up. Challenging. So I've got this to a point where after I'm all warmed up and we're about the later part of the set, I pretty much get this at a what I consider to be a totally fine level for the nature of the gig. There's a lot of Yngwie things in there. where I learned a lot about what he does to kind of cheat his way through the harmonic minor scale. Really cool things that he's into, like where he goes, like let's say he's thinking E harmonic minor. He will go like at the end of Rising Force. It's like so to round out the preparing for the gig, I made an entire playlist in iTunes, everything I needed to learn. Then I made, how shall I say, manipulatable MP3 copies of all of the tunes. Not that I'm recommending you do that, but that's what I did. And I transposed them all so they could be played on my D guitar. So now when I'm preparing for the gig, I sit with the actual guitar I'm going to use on the gig, and I play along to the entire set list, transposed to the appropriate tuning for the guitar, and then I can just sit there and I can play the whole thing. And you'll hear this Strat, this is my 62 reissue. It has David Allen pickups in it. It's like a high output bridge pickup. I have the Blackmore setting, so I have the middle pickup all the way down, all the way flush down to the body. And it's a lot louder than the other guitar. And it's a lot of fun to play on the gig. So now I have the set list set up in D. I have practice patches on my amplifier, and I just go through the gig. I set the strap up at the right height. I practice it standing up, practice various performance elements that I want to get right. And I practice it through my Marshall, at times of day when my neighbors don't mind so much. And then that's the rig I brought on the gig. I brought the Marshall, the full pedal board, this guitar. And so there's a lot of things on the stage that are the same as they were at home. And that's something that you can do in order to make the foreign situation seem more familiar. Make sure you've already put yourself through so much of it. That's kind of what I used to get to land the TSO gig. I took my amp and everything down to a rehearsal room and played along to the entire TSO set that I needed to do for the audition. So by the time I got to the audition, it was exactly like what I had done in the rehearsal room. And then the only question they asked me was, do I mind playing a Jackson? And I said, which answer will get me the gig? And they said, okay, you're hired. Something like that. Anyway, I'm going to turn it over. I'm going to start looking at the chat window here and see if there's any questions that have come up. I'm going to pop this chat window out as I was instructed to do. So, Tor asks if this was the Strat I used on the Gilmore course. This is the Strat that I used on the Gilmore course, and I get some nice compliments about playing Rising Force. I think probably. So, do you guys have any questions or anything I didn't cover right here that you'd like to hear about? Are there any Blackmore fans out there that have anything? Jeff Sheets is chiming in here to help me out. He asks me, how important is nailing the exact tone for the gig? Well, depends on the gig, right? I mean, it's interesting watching the different guys that have done the Joe Lynn gig over the course of the last couple of years. Steve is Steve Brown, big fan of the Wolfgang, but he gets close enough to the tone. I was fairly insecure about the fact that I only have real single coils in like all my Strats. The noiseless ones, I hear other guys get great tone on the noiseless ones. Every time I try them, it's like just, I don't know, I'm uncomfortable. So I started using a noise suppressor pedal, just a basic noise suppressor, and it seemed to work great, and I was comfortable, and I got the tone. The thing about like these gigs, like the Kitaro gig, I was asked, hey, can you play like David Gilmour? I was like, you're going to pay me to do that? That's awesome. This one, it's like, you know, I'm not being told, let's make it as Blackmore-y as possible, because there's certain things about my tone that are more Hendrixy, and there's those, you know, real Gilmour-y moments that I have and stuff like that. But what I love about it is that I'm back on a Strat, because I'm the TSO gig is, you know, very humbucker set bridge guitars. You know, I do it on a Gibson Flying V, and I love it. I'm having a great time doing it. I do the Rock of Ages gig on a Flying V, but this gets me back on the Strat, and I just, you know, it's a whole other machine, man. I'm like, you know, using this thing and doing my. Wow, I just pulled that off my guitar. I had no idea. It has threads in it. I think I can screw it back on. Let's get a repair person on the chat window. All right. Have you experimented with the Kemper or Axe as a lighter way to travel for gigs? I have all three of the best modeling units you can name sitting here in my studio. And if I have the option to backline a Marshall and use pedals, I will do that every time. It's like I sit with these things and they sound great and they work great. And I'm going to be using this amplifier on some orchestral Rock of Ages gigs. Because it's all direct processing, and the Amplifier 12 is hands down the smallest, lightest weight, and comparable sounding of all the units. But we use the Fractal, we use the Axe effects on the TSO gig. It sounds great, very reliable. And I have the Kemper, and I made a whole album on it, and it sounds great too. So I'm equal opportunity demolisher of digital units. And could I show how I hold the pick between my fingers? All right. It's mostly it's against the side of that finger with the thumb down on it. And then if I do any hybrid type stuff, I use my middle finger. That's pretty much it. Thank you, old dog, for your compliment about my studious approach. How much time did I get to prepare? From when I got the call from Joe, it was at least a month. So it was, you know, but you have to time it out. I'm trying to think when I've been under more pressure. Like I had other gigs going on at the same time. I had to relearn the full 80s set for Broadway's Rock of Ages band because we did a job, and then, you know, I have other things going on. So it's challenging just to, you know, to put that data file in your head. And it was my kids' spring break. We went on vacation. So coming into the first week of gigs, I had been like, you know, out of town for a week, and like I had to plan around that. So, you know, life is part of planning for gigs as well. Sorry if I'm taking these out of order. Let's see. Eric, thank you. So I have to nail both Blackmore and Malmsteen. Basically, I have the hardest gig in the world, but one of the most enjoyable hard gigs in the world. Is that a standard whammy bar, or has it been upgraded? I don't know. It was upgraded. It was so. In what I was talking about with using the two Strats to prepare, one that made it easier to play along with the original Blackmore versions, the standard one, and then this one where I played along with all the live versions and stuff. These have the same bridge on them. I think it's an American special bridge or Lone Star bridge with a couple of Callahan upgrades, and then when you put the Callahan block in the Lone Star bridge, it's not angled correct, so then I had to get a different bar. It's a slightly shorter bar because I was shooting for a Gilmour thing. I'm not sure that I love it. I might get a longer one. And I had them made by some guy in California. Because I'm a nerd, right? And Jeff McErlane. How did I meet Jeff McErlane? I met him teaching at a now defunct guitar camp. And no, Jeff, I don't have the $20 that I owe you. Any advice on playing some stock rock and metal licks? How do you get auditions playing for signed and touring artists? What brand? Okay, so let me start with what brand and model compressor do I use? I have, for a long time, I just used the Boss, the blue Boss compressor. I still use Boss effects with some regularity, but I went boutique and got the Exotic SP, and what I really like about it is that it has these dip switches that allow you to do a little bit of EQing so that you can turn it into a slightly, you can make it, there's like a high pass filter, you can make it diminish some lows and give you a little bit of like a brightness boost while you compress. And I thought that that helped me get into the Blackmore zone for this particular gig. Getting auditions for signed or touring artists. Yeah, it's so funny. Like the Kitaro gig was because I was in a band that I loved. They were my band that we were, signed and dropped, and we were playing gigs trying to get another record deal. I got seen by his management, and when approached about possibly doing the gig, I said yes. So I think one of the ways to get auditions for these artists is to put yourself out there, to say yes to things, not everything, but say yes to things. And I just treat every gig like it's an entree to meeting someone who can possibly, get you more work. So you just always put your best foot forward, and that's what gets you there. It was interesting when I got the TSO, when I joined the TSO, because it's really a band, and but I'm still the new guy because everyone else, except now Joel Hoekstra, everyone else was there longer than me. And so I was the guy that got picked to be asked, like, hey man, how'd you get that gig? How can I get that gig? And that gave me lots of insecurity for years. But what I tell everybody about that was that, I'd done 3 years of touring with Kitaro. We'd been to Japan, Singapore, everywhere. I'd played Carnegie Hall and Radio City. Like I had a resume that was just based on, the hard work I did with my original band, and then, putting myself out there and in the right place at the right time. So it wasn't like I had set about, like, hey man, I'm trying to meet, the guys in the Trans-Siberian Orchestra. It just wound up being, a conspiracy of coincidences. The same place I met Jeff McErlane, I met Marty Friedman, and Marty and I got to be friends while I was playing for Kitaro. And then the TSO called Marty, and Marty said, I'm not available. And then they called me, but then I had to audition just like everybody else. And there were other guys with more chops than me. But, I tried to put together the whole package. Like, I'm going to get up there. The interesting thing about the TSO gig was that that's a gig where for the audition, no liberties. You play the album, you just play it like it is. They spent a lot of time on those records. They had them perfect to their way of thinking, and that's good enough for me. Like, let's just do that. And I went in and played those album versions verbatim. Some guys took liberties, and I think I fared better in the audition for that. Sorry, long answer to short questions. My strings. So these are 11 to 52, D'Addario 11 to 52. These are for standard. These are 10 to 52. And this guitar has been in E flat, and now it's in D. And man, it's so easy to play in D. And any tip for lefty guitar players? Well, I'm a left-handed person, so if I were to give you my tip for a left-handed guitar player, it's to play right-handed. No, I'm kidding. I think you know, Hendrix, Tony Iommi, Albert King. You're in rare company, my brother. So go for it. And anything else here? Well, one thing that's interesting about the Joe Lynn gig is that someone asked about stock licks. You know, we did Smoke on the Water the other night, which, you know, it's like, man, it just suddenly hits you like, wow, you know, this guy played it with Blackmore, like, and there I am. And, you know, how authentic am I going to be? Probably my guitar should be in tune. That would be a good tip. That'd be a good place to start, right? And, you know, I've played that song. I've learned the solo, but I didn't know we were going to play it that night. So, you know, it's famously done with the fingers picking the strings towards each other. Like, you know, if you're going to play that song, like, you know, with one of the guys that sang it with Blackmore, like, you got to play it right, you know, or at least some way authentically. And trying to think what let me see if there's anything else here. Do I play the blues? Yeah, man. Every now and then I get the blues and I play the blues. Did I learn all the albums of the band for the edition or just the actual album for the tour? Well, hopefully you get the set list and you only have to learn a certain number of tunes. I mean, you know, like if we're talking about the signature bits, you know, like the TSO thing, right? It was all about learning and the you know, the big run at the end of that. Which I'm giving away the store right here. That's the trick of it. And here. You play the same note across the second and third string. It's tricky. And what tips do I have for improving picking speed? Well, I think I touched on it before. Practice slowly and with the metronome. Speed it up a little over time, but then you also have to do this kind of what do we call it? Visualization of things at the faster tempo. And one of the ways there is to set the metronome so that you're hearing like 8, you know, a lot of times we keep speeding up the metronome till it's at like 240 or something like that, and you're still playing 1 Eana, 2 Eana, 3 Eana, 4 Eana, 1 Eana, 2 Eana, 3 Eana, 4 Eana. You should slow the metronome down to half of that so that you're playing 1 Eana, 2 Eana, 3 Eana, 4 Eana, 1 Eana, 2 Eana, 3 Eana, 4 Eana, 1 Eana, 2 Eana, 3 Eana, 4 Eana. So you're playing 8 notes for every click, and you put the emphasis on every, you know, 9th note, and that will smooth things out. And then, you know, you should do a little bit of homework, deconstruct what your picking style is, and see how you're doing your string crossings, down, up, you know, how you're getting across the strings. You know, I'm pretty much a strict alternate picker unless I'm sweeping. So I do a lot of exercises, you know, like, sorry, too many effects. If I do my scales, I'll start it there, 3 notes per string, and then I start it here. So that the picking's backwards, and then I do 4s. And then I do descending 4s. And I do this one. I find that one is really confusing to an alternate picker. And, you know, I do a lot of that and then learn repertoire. And between those two things, you'll start to get, you know, a handle on all the tricky bits. But it really helps to just take stabs at the really fast version of it so that you can just kind of feel that energy and get it in your ears, because your ears are ultimately what's going to pull your fingers into playing really fast. So that's my tip on that. And that's about picking speed. How often do they change it up and throw? What are my favorite songs? Favorite strings will wait to I prefer. Do I like coded string? I just use the D'Addario XLs. I've been playing D'Addario forever. Shout out to D'Addario. Shout out to all my people. Fender, Conquest Cables, the Amplifier by Atomic Amps, Marshall. But you know, for D'Addario, I'll use, like, this is 11 to 52. This is 10 to 52 on a standard Strat. Gibson scale guitars, I use 11 to 49. There's one tune in the Jolene Turner set from a solo record where it's in drop C. So that's like 11 to 52, but I put a 54 on the bottom string, and I do that on a Telecaster. So it's just whatever the gig calls for. You get the right strings for the gig, but they're always D'Addario strings, right? Gilbert, who doesn't love TSO and Kitaro as well? You're welcome for the help. And what Marshall heads do you use? So the 800 there is a 2205 split channel that I had restored by a guy named Blackie Pagano, and 50 watt. And on top there is a 1987X, early version 1987X. So it did not come with an effects loop, and I had the Metropolis effects loop put in it. And I should mention that the 2205, for anyone that's familiar with the JCM 800 split channel, that model was heavily redesigned over the course of its life. So the late models, I prefer the late versions. So that's a late version 2205. But it's kind of like the Michael Schenker meets Tom Morello amp, I think. Both of those guys were 2205 players. So I'm very happy with that amp. And Mark Love, do I play or like 24 fret guitars? I have not met a 24 fret guitar that I've enjoyed playing, but I don't, you know, I'm an open-minded person, and I feel like there will be a time when that will be an appropriate choice for me. What's the best way to learn what scales work with what chords? You know, get a good teacher and start approaching. I think that it's more about learning the arpeggios over the chords and then filling in the gaps to get the scale based around the arpeggio. That's what I always that's what I took away from lessons, strict lessons about improvisation. I think it's more important to learn arpeggios and cool licks, and then you'll start to make sense out of what the scales are when you fill in the gaps between those two things. You know, focus on just this scale or that scale was never that fruitful for me. You know, I mean, hey, when Yngwie came out, once we learned, you know, that was an awesome scale. I really love the dreaming solo that I had to learn for the Joe Lynn thing. And it goes something like that. Does that whole thing, and then Yngwie goes full Hendrix, right? He goes, you know, doing the Joe Lynn gig, man. It was like I just had to learn, like, listen to Blackmore and Yngwie all day. Like, I mean, it's not a bad job, right? So I'm very motivated on the gigs where I really enjoy the material. Let's say that's one thing about preparing for a gig that's always going to be true. Anyway, guys, I think I'm out of time. I'm just 3 minutes over. Thank you to everybody who sent in questions and put up with the technical difficulties at the top. It's my first time doing it, so I apologize for the wait. And some tips on memorizing long pieces. In memorizing long pieces, I think it's divide and conquer. And usually you find repetitive material, you find repetitive material cropping up all through it. So, once you make sense out of it, I think I had to learn the entirety of that Mozart Figaro thing for the TSO when I first did the audition. And that's just all scale work. That's hard, I don't know. You just have to keep playing it. I find repetition, there's no cure for repetition. I've had a couple of things backfire on me where I have to come up with like a mental trigger to force myself to do the right thing. Some friends of mine and I have been doing this AC/DC tribute called To Hell in Black, and for some reason I can never remember to go to the I can never remember to go to that part in Back in Black, and I had to, because we were doing it like very late in the set. I'm all tired, I'm frazzled. I think the song's about to end, but no, you have to play that part. And I had to like say, it's like, after you play the solo, you play a chorus and then you play that part, and like that helped me remember exactly what I needed to do. So I think things like that, memorization tricks, everybody has different ones. Sometimes I really need them. And my favorite Gilmore licks. We're going to archive this so that everybody can watch later. And I see Jeff chiming in here. My favorite Gilmore licks are everybody's favorite Gilmore licks. So I think comfortably now. That's pretty much it. That and the very first solo of the very first note of the second solo. Come on, it's Dave Gilmore. You gotta love it. Anyway, anyway, that's it. I'm gonna wrap up. Thank you guys. Prepping for a gig. Find out what you need to play. Make a playlist. If you need to tune everything to the appropriate key, get the guitar that you're going to play the gig on, surround yourself with the elements that you're going to use on the actual gig so that when you get to the gig, you're comfortable. You know, you've got the guitar that you practiced on, you've got the sound that you're comfortable with. Repetition, repetition, repetition. Don't play favorites with the set. Learn all the tunes. Take the signature parts, make sure you have them nailed. Take the exposed parts, make sure that you can play them in a relaxed fashion. Make a list of the hard things and tackle those, fill in the gaps as you learn the songs. And then just rinse and repeat. Keep doing it until the muscle memory's there, and that way, once you're in the rehearsal, you can relax. And you can make everybody else relax and know that you've got it nailed and you're going to keep the gig. That's pretty much the name of the game. That's how I play it. So I hope you guys got something out of this. And I have to be up at 5 in the morning to catch a plane to Chicago for the next 3 Joe Lynn Turner dates, which are going to be awesome. We're doing Chicago, Cincinnati, and Detroit. And then we're doing another short run up to Boston and into Portland, Maine. And then we're going to be wrapping it up at the Sellersville Theater in Philadelphia. So that's what's happening for the next 2 weeks with me. Be sure and check out a lot of this material is covered in my courses on TrueFire, so be sure and check those out. And you know, right now we're planning on an album release for my band Daredevil Squadron. We've got the album in the can. The video is currently available. Check it out. It's called Last Resort, and that's me back on the Flying V. And you know, anyway, message me on the Facebook or wherever, and enjoy. Thank you very much for being a part of this. I had a good time. And then the awkward part where I go turn the camera off, right? Yeah, okay.